Good morning. Trans Widow Uta Hagen here of Trans Widow Uta Hagen YouTube channel with one of my artifacts. Of course, I've got my two daffodils that are now blooming, and this is a sprig of rosemary cut from my rosemary plant that I have in a cold frame, and it's done so well overwintering that it's blooming. Don't they have sweet little flowers? So I'm glad I could show you that. And I am here today to discuss all the different threads to bring up when you are making logical points clear regarding the lies and disingenuous illogic and cult promulgation, cult recruitment of the cross-sex ideation movement, the trans movement. And I suggest that when you get into this with a friend or relative, to start off saying, well, I just have some points that are based on a scientific foundation as well as foundations for women's rights. And I want to be sure that I get to all of my points. I'm not going to yell at you, and I expect you not to yell at me. And it has to do with women's sports, the use of wrong sex hormones, and gonadotrophin agonists, which are also called puberty blockers, brand name often used Lupron, as well as the fact that evolutionary biologists such as Colin Wright and Carole Hooven, despite the fact that they are being canceled from their fields, are still maintaining the truth, which is that in mammalian evolution we have sexual reproduction. There are two sexes, male and female, and this includes all mammals and humans. There is also the issue of the detransitioners who are canceled, deplatformed, and defamed. And as well, trans widows are a group that are not ever heard from. No data has been taken from them, despite the fact that, for example, out west, there's one trans widow who knows that her ex-husband went on to marry 3 more times, and then he completely detransitioned. And then there is what's going on in schools, as demonstrated by a recent article in the Free Press, which was originated by Barry Weiss, regarding PS 321 in Park Slope, Brooklyn. And I have an interesting little bit about that because that's the elementary school my children went to in the 1990s and early 2000s, and they did not get this ideology. So there we have it, several threads. And I would even suggest that you say to your dialogue partner, what I'd like to do is just cover each of these threads in 3 minutes or less. And you can spend 3 minutes or less rebutting the presentation of facts and scientific foundation that I'm giving to you. I think it's starting to be important. It's coming up in many different ways. Even in Delaware, there is some discussion regarding restricting the so-called affirmative care, such that those under 18 minors are not going to get wrong sex hormones or surgeries, as well as the new article, which I will cover in another video, about a surgeon who does these surgeries and is now admitting that very many of the outcomes, a high percentage of the outcomes, have very, very serious problematic conditions that can't be prevented, such as, let's see, incontinence, such as that the intestines are compromised because they just can't help it. They end up accidentally cutting part of the colon in those surgeries. Yeah. Okay. So, first, the public resignation of William Bock, who is the former general counsel for U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. He quit his post at the NCAA recently because of the NCAA not preventing males from playing on females' teams. This is a quote from him. He says, "You're going to reduce performance by a small amount if you reduce testosterone levels." And that's, of course, in males. And then further, he says, there's massive, essentially authorized cheating taking place and dramatically harming women. And I really appreciate that he resigned rather than be coerced into going along with the idea that if a testosterone level is lowered to a so-and-so amount, then you are sort of the same as a female and you can go play on those teams. We've had a lot of injuries recently, and as Kelly J. Keene and Megyn Kelly have recently said, some woman, some female player, a girl or a woman, will get killed. There's already a volleyball player somewhere in the southeast who has possibly permanent traumatic brain injury from the ball being spiked by a male player on the girls' team opposing her team, and it hit her in the head. Okay, now this next thread, so that's the, women's sports, girls' sports thread. I have to just also, as an aside, mention that, wow, if there weren't so many girls' sports teams, which are sort of a result of Title IX, would these males really want to declare that they are females? It's because of the progress that's been made for females in sports that enables these men to have a team of females that they want to identify into. I feel like sometimes I can't believe that I have to say this. And I would go so far as to say that to someone who is trying to give me the other side of this dialogue. I can't believe I have to say this. Men have a huge, obvious advantage in upper body strength. And that even affects running and track and stuff like that. Okay. Now on to Dr. Sallie Baxendale, who is a British neuropsychologist. This is about the dangers of the gonadotrophin agonists, the puberty blockers. Vague hints from poor quality studies are insufficient to allow people considering these treatments, that is usually young teens who have immature cognition in any case, to make an informed decision regarding the possible impact on their neuropsychological function. Meaning there are some now admissions happening that these gonadotrophin agonists actually cause the IQ to be lowered. And so How could someone who's been on that for a couple of years, who's only 14 years old, let's say it's a girl, how could she be making the decision whether or not to start testosterone when her decision making, just cognitively, has been compromised by the puberty blockers? I think it's also probably getting compromised by all of the upstrokes and positivity and love bombing that she's getting as a result of declaring that she's trans. And then that means no one ever challenges her. She's not going to get challenged on anything. If she does a math assignment badly, then, it's because she's so distressed with the gender dysphoria. This is serious. This is a serious damage being done to cognition, to the development of the intelligence and logical cognition. Critical questions remain unanswered regarding the nature, extent, and performance of any arrested development of cognitive function that may be associated with pharmacological blocking of puberty, says Dr. Baxendale. If cognitive development catches up following the discontinuation of puberty suppression, how long does this take? And is the recovery complete? And so they can't say that it's completely reversible. Additionally, Carole Hooven, along with Colin Wright, who says the same thing, and both of them were essentially canceled in their careers as evolutionary biologists, she resigned her position at Harvard because she got feedback from the transgender woman. That means a man who ideates that he is a female persona, who was on the Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. It's interesting, the word belonging. That's quite subjective. This is at Harvard. So this person, this Neddy, says, it is hard to imagine how these sorts of comments, she's writing about the facts of mammalian reproduction, which is sexual reproduction involving a male and a female. It is hard to imagine how these sorts of comments are supposed to foster a respectful academic dialogue around transgender identities and experiences. So after this kind of pressure, she was told to just get over it and move on by one of her mentors, and she decided, I'm going to have to resign. This is ridiculous. And further, an administrator wrote to her that best practices in science communication and respect for the serious impact is not being considered by these scientists. I mean, I goodness gracious, I remember in my college science classes, which was genetics and anatomy, yes, you had to learn it. You had to just, you had to learn the facts. It wasn't about, they're going to have to give me a break because I didn't remember all of the details. Okay. Oh, this was from, now this is just an interesting little detail from a YouTube channel I just found out from a Canadian detransitioner. The channel is simply called Carole, Carol. She mentioned that a Dr. Crane in California who is this kind of surgeon. He had to deal with a lawsuit when there was this damaged colon, and this was from a female having a so-called phalloplasty. She got extreme infection, and she had to later have a colostomy bag, and that is permanent. Dr. Crane is now in Texas, and he has 9 malpractice cases against him. how anybody can keep their medical licensure after that, I don't know. Okay, now to the indoctrination of the young. It happens that in the Free Press, in an article by Francesca Block, um, is the details at PS 321, which is the school in Park Slope, Brooklyn that my children went to in the late 1990s and early 2000s for their elementary school. At the time, Peter Heaney, who was an openly gay man, said to me as I was dealing with my sons, both of them, extreme trauma, my kindergarten son crying all afternoon, such that the kindergarten teacher was having a hard time maintaining her composure. And my later older son, when he was in fourth grade, expressing suicidal ideation twice at school and once at home, and I had to pay for a psychologist. I got really good support from Peter Heaney and Liz Phillips, who was the assistant principal. She might still be the principal of 321. They didn't mention any principal by name, but there's a coloring book there that has a page to color in and a concept called queer affirming. This is from K through 5. And transgender affirmation. And instead of saying your friends or your classmates, they call them comrades, just like in communist China. And a parent who had escaped from communist China said, using the word comrades comes from communist times. They're using words I don't think are appropriate for elementary school. You know, they're saying this because they don't want us to say boys and girls. And also in this curriculum is a recommended book called When Aiden Became a Brother, and it's about a girl. And this is supposed to be read, and there are many, many of these kind of books being read to elementary school students to brainwash them into the idea they could possibly be trans. Despite the fact of all the other things I just said about the bad outcomes from surgeries, about the lowered IQ from puberty blockers. So the last thread to bring up is indoctrination and propaganda. How is this not propaganda when they're using words like comrades instead of saying something natural like boys and girls? So the question that they ask in this curriculum is, how do you feel when someone tells you what you can or can't do based on your gender? Now, this was not at all what my children were taught when they were going to this school 20 and 25 years ago. They were taught that you can do all kinds of activities. We work in mixed groups of boys and girls. They used the words boys and girls. They were not doing anything of this. I did not know of any students. And as a trans widow, word would have filtered down to me if there were students who were identifying as opposite sex. And a former Soviet Union, an immigrant parent from former Soviet Union, a mother, said, this is the same salad of propaganda with a different dressing. Now, and when contacted, the New York City Department of Education said parents should talk to the administrator or district if they have a problem with this. Okay, yes. And then there was another person who is doing some research on all of this propaganda. She said that controversial material is presented as fact. That's propaganda and indoctrination. And it also demonizes the nuclear family. Yes. There we are. Those are the threads. Propaganda of young and indoctrination of young children, the wreckage of women's sports, the lack of recognition that puberty blockers do irreversible damage, and the lecturing of evolutionary biologists regarding how they communicate their scientific facts so that they shouldn't hurt any man who ideates a female persona. I hope this will help you. When you're done with those conversations, remember, let's keep our volume the same. Let's not raise our volume, and let's not go into rhetoric that is just shouting and repeating. This is why they have to just repeat. Trans women are women. Trans men are men. This is why they have to repeat slogans, because they are bombarding your mind with slogans, preventing you from using your logical cognition. Get outside, do your exercise, feel your centered physical self.